We are here with Navajo County Government communications team during the COVID-19 global pandemic. We are noticing a heightened interest in, or a heightened concern with mental health issues. And because of this, we reached out to some of our local healthcare and mental health professionals to address this. And we're sitting with Shelly Ehmann. Shelly, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I have a bachelor's degree in sociology and psychology back in 1988. I got my master's in counseling in 94. I recently received my master's of science in leadership. I've been working in behavioral health for over 30 years. I started working with kids in residential treatment facilities and group homes. I've done in-home therapy. I've done mobile crisis on suicide, homicide situations down in Phoenix. I started a program up in Missouri, working with residential kids and trying to get them back home with their families reunited there. I've done an outdoor program, moved into an agency finally, working with all sorts of different individuals, and then moved into QM. I've been a QM analyst as well, and then I've done private practice, and then finally came back to ChangePoint and moved into the COO position here. I oversee all the outpatient sites and clinical services. I do clinical supervision, program development, all that wonderful stuff. So it's a little bit about what I do and where I came from.
Well, we're grateful. And ChangePoint, where you have offices throughout the county?
Yes, we have outpatient sites in Winslow, Holbrook, Snowflake, Show Low. We have a hospital in Lakeside, a 16-bed psychiatric hospital there. We have a group home, we have the Safe House, we have housing throughout Navajo County as well that we work with our mentally ill individuals and getting them housing. We're focusing and trying to get some housing for substance abuse, and we're looking at opening up probably a 16-bed substance abuse program, a 30-day program here in Show Low or Lakeside.
So your plate is very full.
We're not bored.
You're not bored. And then COVID-19 came along and that added to your plate.
Absolutely. I think it threw everybody for a loop, obviously. And so we kind of hunkered down there for a little while, kind of seeing what was going to happen, and then understanding that it's going to be a little bit long term, more than what we thought. And services had to change. Our perspective had to change. We did telephone only counseling there for a while, but we also know with substance abuse, domestic violence, people really need to get in and see someone, or we need to see them on Zoom. So we started introducing Zoom appointments and doing groups on Zoom. And then we've opened up to seeing people in person if they need that, if that's what they want. And so we're bringing them in, both families, kids, adults. We're doing small groups of 6 or less. We started doing some kids groups because we know the parents and families are under a lot of stress. They need that outlet. Kids need that socialization. Parents need a break. They've been thrown into a triple role of, being the parent, but now they're also the teacher, and now they're also the entertainment cruise director type thing. That most parents are not educated to be educators. That's not their role. And so that's a real stressor for them, which then causes it with the kids. Are you mom or teacher? Two different things. Kids need that stabilization of mom or dad, and now they're thrown into a different situation that can cause some stress.
Absolutely, and that leads into one of the questions that we had is, what can something like COVID-19, what effects can it have, this type of a situation, on relationships? What are you seeing?
I think what we're going to see is there's going to be some long-term consequences to the isolation. One of the biggest things that we do in therapy is get people not to isolate, to develop relationships. That's the whole point. When we're isolative, we're not made to be in isolation. Humans were made for fellowship. They were made to have relationships, have interaction. And this has really thrown everybody for a loop. If you haven't had, and thank goodness we had the technology we do have today, we can at least see people through Zoom or FaceTime, that kind of stuff, and that helps. Seeing someone and not just hearing them, because there's a lot more going on than just the hearing part. But yet you're not able to really connect and sit down and see everything that's going on. I can't really see what my brother is really going through, because I can't really assess and see through Zoom everything that's happening. I don't get all that body language, you know. But if we're deprived of that human connection, depression, anxiety, paranoia, all those things start cropping up. With our mentally ill clients, they like to isolate, and that's part of the symptoms. And so really trying to get them to connect and have that social interaction, and now we've isolated them. And some of them will come back to us and say, we love this is fantastic, but it doesn't help their mental state. It increases those symptoms. It increases that depression, suicide. And so, and then others have come to realize, I really do need that socialization. I want to come in. I need to get back to my community. I need to have a connection with someone else. You know, kids, school, a lot of things, for kids, a lot of their needs are at school, where they get that socialization. That's where they make friends. That's how they learn how to develop relationships, how they learn to deal with broken hearts and disappointments and problem solving. They don't have that right now. And they're stressed out because they can't see their friends, and they're getting depressed because they can't connect with friends. They don't have that connection. It's great to have their family around. And I think at the beginning of this, it was great for good families. You were forced to have family time, which was good. But now you need some external relationships as well, to try out those skills and learn those skills. And if kids don't have that, what's going to happen in the future? They're not going to be able to make those relationships. How's that going to help with them, not only in their ongoing life, but business life? If you don't know how to problem solve or be able to read people to make relationships with, we're going to suffer. Our whole community is going to suffer. So I think there's going to be some long-term, I mean, and even with our families, you have kids and their families there, they've been stuck in, so many rooms. Thank goodness for us in Navajo County, we have more single homes. You have your house, and so you kind of have that isolation. You don't have the apartments and you're on top of each other as much as the cities do. I feel bad for them because they can't even go out to a yard or a deck, get outside. At least most of us here can at least go in the backyard or the front yard and get some fresh air, and maybe have a little bit of space. But if you're on top of each other, it gets annoying after a while, and then you have, even under the best of circumstances, you're going to have frustrations and irritations, and how do you deal with that? You can't get away from each other. So there needs to be outlets. Phone calls, we've been doing therapy through phone calls and case management, reaching out to people, checking in with people, making sure they're okay. And that's great, but Zoom is better because we can actually see them. Obviously in person is going to even be better for their health. Another population is the substance abuse population. The big thing with substance abuse is accountability. I need to see you and make sure, are you drinking, are you using? Peers hold each other accountable. But if they're not around, who's holding them accountable? Again, you can put me on Zoom, you don't know what I'm doing off camera. And it's hard to assess. You can't really see me to know if I'm using or not, to hold me accountable. those that have been around a while, if they know their triggers, they can get into one of the NA or AA Zoom meetings. And so that tends to be good for them. Newbies, those that are just going into recovery, they don't have that accountability, someone checking in with them. You know, it's a lot harder, I think, to be accountable for what you're doing. So one of the things when we could, I said we need to get our IOP going with at least Zoom, if not in person. And so we have done that. We have a small group of IOP clients, and then we have a Zoom large group that we're doing. So we're giving them some services, and we're getting them together to interact with each other and help each other out. But I think there are going to be some long-term consequences down the road. We're already seeing increased suicides, we're seeing increased domestic violence, we're seeing increased substance abuse.
And that's the next question actually that we wanted to ask was, are you seeing any trends locally that seem to be tied directly to COVID-19?
I know that there's been an increase in suicides, and I'm hearing that from the county and from other entities. You know, we've seen an increase in suicides. At the beginning, we didn't see crisis with kids. Everybody was able to maintain a little bit. And like, we can maintain for a couple, 3 weeks maybe, you know? And then after that, coping skills wear down. And actually this last weekend, all the hospitals, children's hospital beds were full. We ended up having to take kids to Vegas, to their hospitals. Their hospitals got full. And I got a call that we needed to take someone to another state. And I was like, wow, whoa, we need to do something here. How do we get these kids, give the family a break, give them some social interaction, and maybe that would decrease the stress and the anxiety and the depression that's going on currently. Our hospital has been full. We have 16 beds. We're averaging about 14 being filled every day. And then we're having to send people out if they get full. And we want to treat our own community members here. We know we do the best care. Their support systems are here. They know what's around them. If we're sending them out, you're sending them to a foreign place almost, you know. Their supports are 3 hours away, 4 hours away, whatever the case may be. So we are seeing an increase in crisis. Our shelter is getting lots of calls and increasing there.
And those are the shelter calls, would that be domestic violence?
Domestic violence, yeah. So the Safe House, we've had an increase of domestic violence residents coming through and providing them the supports in a shelter situation, which is really a weird situation in the COVID-19 world that we live in right now. We want to make sure we're providing safety for our staff, but we also have to look at safety for our clients. We know our clients are dealing with some real stressors, and not connecting is not going to help. And so how do we do that as safe as we possibly can and still provide those services? So, trying to think if there's any other trends. Yeah, I think that's really the domestic violence, the suicides, and the crisis we've really noticed with children.
Well, that's heartbreaking, and I feel like if you're in a family situation, and a good family situation, this is very difficult. So what is it like for those who don't, first of all, have a good family situation at all, or who don't have a family at all?
Right.
Which is very concerning.
Yes, and you threw that substance abuse, and a lot of people use alcohol and drugs to cope with their stress. And if there's a lot more stress, there's a lot more use of drugs and alcohol, which has other consequences within that family relationship. So even with a good family that has good coping skills, they're still stressed out. there's anxiety, there's depression. I think our community, our world is going through the stages of grief. We're dealing with, I don't think, we're starting to deal with some of the grief, but we've dealt with anger, we've seen the riots, we've dealt with this can't be happening kind of thing, you know. I think we're even going into some of that bargaining part. Once we get into that depression, what is that really going to look like? And you're talking about families that don't have maybe the skill sets, or maybe they don't have some of the coping mechanisms, or they were dealing with stressors and traumas before this happened. And this has compounded that, and what's going on with the kids in those families, but what's going on with the adults too, and they're trying to do the best they can, yet they're struggling, trying to just maintain and be able to get through this, but no one knows when through this is. And so there's, you know, if you gave someone a date, they'd be like, okay, I can probably do it till then. There's no date. We have no idea. And so that adds to that stressor and the symptoms of depression or anxiety or mental illness. You know, and they don't know what to do with that. There's a lot of fear out there. We don't know what's going on. You know, and if you don't have people around you that are support systems for you, what does that person do?
If you don't have someone to eat with, someone to laugh with, because
I don't know if you've ever watched Big Brother, the TV show. It's quite an experiment with human beings and their reactions. So it's 16 people that go into this house that don't know each other, and they have no connection with the outside world at all for 3 months. And it's amazing to watch how they have to make that human connection. They have to touch, physical touch. Humans need that. And so even though it has nothing to do with relationships or sexuality or anything like that, it is true that I just need to touch him. I don't care if you're a stranger and I've only known you a week. You've all I've got here. So I need to have that touch. And so now you think of your friends and your family members that you haven't been able to see or touch or hug and things like that, how that is affecting you, how that's affecting the kids, how's that affecting those that don't have family, are by themselves, they have no one. And if they don't have a pet, that's even more stressful. You know, dogs are great, cats are great, you have something to care for and talk to. We need to have that, and not having that just increases the stress. And what is that going to look like in the future? I think we're going to have a lot more need for therapy groups. I think we're going to need a lot more have skill building on how to deal with stressors. But I think there's going to be a lot more acting out that we're going to have to deal with. The police are going to have to deal with. The courts are going to have to deal with. Physicians, medical people are going to have to deal with, because if they are not dealing with their mental health, it may turn in internally, and so now you have physical issues that are going on top of everything else.
well, that makes sense. And before the pandemic, the way that I cared for my mental health looked a certain way. But now I'm in survival mode every day. And the way that I attempt to care for my mental health has shifted in a big way. And I have to practice a lot of self-compassion to say, I'm in survival mode. This isn't about improving or becoming better as a person. This is about making it to Tuesday.
Right.
And then on Tuesday, it's about making it to Wednesday.
Mm-hmm.
How is caring for your mental health different during a crisis like COVID-19? What would that look like?
Hey, even with our clients, I think initially, we did the telephone thing and they thought this was great, and okay, and then they got bored with it because you're not going to do an hour session on the phone. It's just hard to do that. And then they're like, we're not going to do this. Then we as therapists go into, we need to maintenance. we need, not only for ourselves, but for our clients. So we're trying to, what does maintenance look like? Getting them from Tuesday to Wednesday to Thursday, you know. I think for ourselves, you have to eat right. You have to sleep. You gotta get your sleep in, and because that will help you have the energy to deal with that stress or that depression. Exercise, meditation, or spirituality, whatever that you do for those things, you need to have that as part of your routine on a daily basis. You got to maintain your medications. It's really easy. I'm at home, I'm not seeing anyone, I'm not doing anything, so I'm going to stop my medications. I don't need those. Or I'm not going to get dressed. I'm going to wear my PJs all day long. Well, that sounds great for the first few days, and it's kind of cool, but really, we need to dress and get up and move and try to make it as normal as we possibly can. What do we have control over? Let's control that. What we don't have control over, we're going to have to let that go. And we have to be okay with that. And that may be through the meditation, it may be through your religion, it may be through your support systems, it may be calling someone on the phone saying, hey, I'm struggling here. What do I do? How do I do? What are you doing? You know, and just talking about it.
And there's so many ways to connect. None can really replace in-person connection,
Right.
But there's video messaging, voice messaging, video chat.
Yes, use that. Reach out. One of the other things in helping your self-care is reaching out to others, checking in with the elderly, checking in with those that are living by themselves, checking in with family members and friends. How you doing? It gives you a purpose too. And as humans, we need to have that. Those of us that have been able to continue work, fantastic. You have a purpose. You're going out and giving back to your community. Those that have lost jobs, what are they doing? You know, they're struggling with that. I'm not giving back to my community. I'm not being able to take care of my family. I'm not able to take care of myself. And that's a whole thing of that depression. So what can you put in place of that? Is that calling someone? Is that helping someone else? Is that, you know, if you happen to be able to go to the grocery store, get stuff and give it to your neighbor who can't get out, you know, something to give back, to give your life purpose in what you're doing. It's very important. I mean, we have a mentally ill client right now that was in really severe depression. She's now found a way to get back to others and come in and help work with other clients. And so now she has a purpose, and the depression has gone down, and she's smiling, and she's interacting, and this is great for her. And that's what we need to do as individuals.
It's so beautiful that we can care for ourselves by caring for others.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Again, that goes back to humans need humans. We need to have that connection. If we don't have that connection, there's struggles.
There's struggles. I feel like our residents are very good at taking care of each other. Especially in rural communities, we have a lot of them up here in Navajo County, and we are a little bit more aware of our neighbors. And I ache for our elderly population because they're the vulnerable population, and they're the ones that are most likely to be living alone.
Right.
And so it's been extra hard on them. And then of course, we're very concerned about our students. I live with 3 students, and it's, you know, I appreciate your insight because I think, yeah, this is hard. Just today I had 2 screens open doing my job, which gives me purpose, and I'm really, really grateful for that. And I had a 3rd screen open trying to help my 2nd grader learn how to use Google Slides.
Right. And they're doing stuff I didn't do in 2nd grade.
Right.
You know, and I'm like, I feel like I have to go back through 2nd grade again. You know? So it is a struggle. It's a whole new deal.
Very fluid.
The one thing I really like about Navajo County, we have a lot of resources and support within our communities. I've seen that for the last 20 years that I've lived here. That's one great thing we do have here, where the city doesn't necessarily have. They have a lot of resources, but they don't necessarily look out for the neighbor like we do here. We want to make sure they take care of each other. We also know with some of the stressors and some of the hoarding that occurred, that happened all around the world. You know, you go into that survival mode, but when it comes back down to it, we want to take care of each other. And I think that's one good thing that we do here in Navajo County.
I agree. And we had talked about some tips. I love the tips that you gave. Eating good.
Eat healthy as best you can. I know we have that COVID-19, 20 pounds, whatever. But yeah, eating healthy gives you that energy. Sleeping gives you that energy to deal with the stressors. And then if you're exercising and you're meditating or using whatever spirituality modality that you like, using that and reaching out to others. I think if you reach out to others, you make that connection, whether it's through video or phone, whatever, you make that connection and you feel part of the community. I think part of the deal is when you're isolated, you don't think you're a part of anything. You got your, whatever is in your home, your family, whoever that is. If it's 2 of you, 5 of you, however it is. But you need to be part of that community. So reaching out to someone else, all of a sudden now you're part of the community. You're not all alone. I think one of the tips I'd say, be aware of how much news you're taking in, because that can be very, very overwhelming. The other thing is look throughout the world. It's not just here in Navajo County. I look at the BBC and I look at news in different parts of the world, and they're dealing with it the same as we are. They're dealing with the same school stressor issues. They're dealing with the isolation and mental health issues the same way. They're dealing with, do you open gyms, do you open bars, what do you do? I mean, we're all doing it in our parts of the world, but we're all in the same boat. And if we see that, sometimes that helps. Okay, it's not just me, it's not just Navajo County. We're all in this, doing the same thing, thinking the same thing, you know. So
It has been very unifying. It's not something I would ever wish or hope for, but it's been beautiful to see the entire world connected by this thread of survival. And we're seeing how much more we are alike than we are different.
yes, there's a lot of positives in this situation. And it's how do we look at those positives and use that as we go forward? What can we learn from it? How can we better ourselves from what we've had to deal with? And how then eventually can we help others that deal with stresses? So all of us now have some sense of empathy and understanding of dealing with stress and dealing with chaos and crisis that we may never have had the opportunity to deal with. And so we couldn't empathize with other people that have dealt with that. Now we can't. All of us can, on some level.
On a historical level.
Yes, truly. I think that my grandmother, she went through the Spanish flu and she lost a brother through that. And I've connected that, kind of going, how did they deal with that back then? And my grandmother always talked about her brother, you know, and how he died in the Spanish flu. And I'm like, so how are we going to look in history? How are our grandchildren going to look at how we dealt with stuff? It will be interesting.
It will be. I have a 13-year-old and she's been using her cell phone to take pictures of all the social distancing signs that she finds. And what are you doing? And she said, it's history, Mom. And she's right.
Yeah.
One thing that we've added, one thing that I've added is being more intentional about my gratitude practice. Trying every day to find, even if it's something as basic as I'm grateful for food. Or I'm grateful for my home. So
I have a good stuff jar. So I put something at the end of the week in there, something good that happened to me during that week. So it doesn't matter if it was a rough week, something good happened.
Yeah.
You know, my health, have food, I have a great house, I have friends, I have a job, whatever the case may be, there's something good all the time. So we have to look at those things. What is good in our life right now? And I know some people struggle with that a lot, and rightly so. And I don't want to diminish that at all, and some of the things they're having to deal with. But we have to look at, how can we get ourselves into a better position, look at the good things and what can we do.
Yeah, I love that, and I especially love that we don't want to diminish. We do need to validate that we are all in survival mode. It's not healthy to pretend.
Right. It is what it is, and we need to be aware of that and not diminish it for our own selves and what we're having to deal with. And sometimes we get going and I'm working and I'm making sure things are going, and sometimes I need to sit down and say, okay, this is what's really going on. This is the way I feel. This is the way, I'm seeing things or dealing with, and we need to recognize that to be able to go forward. In therapy, we talk all the time, don't stuff your feelings. You gotta deal with your emotions and your feelings. If you start stuffing those, they're gonna come out one way or another, and usually it's not positive. So have a way of acknowledging how you feel, the fears you have, the chaos you're dealing with, the sadness you may be having. Acknowledge that, recognize it, it's okay. And there's nothing wrong with you having those emotions. Everyone is having them at some point right now. So just acknowledge them and let them, it's okay, and be okay with yourself.
Thank you. And you had mentioned a few minutes ago the resources that we have. Would you mind talking a little bit locally what's available to our residents?
There's a lot of private practice clinicians out there if you're needing that kind of service, for private insurance, private pay. You have ChangePoint obviously is here for crisis. We do a lot of crisis stuff, so if you really go into crisis, we can do assessments and find what the best service is for you. We have in our outpatient sites, if you need therapy or case management, or you just need someone to talk to, or maybe you need a group. With substance abuse, you have the CBI. They have a detox unit as well as a 30-day program in Navajo County.
What is CBI?
CBI.
Oh.
It's an agency that's local. They also have sites in other areas in Arizona, but we do have them up here as a resource, which is kind of nice. So if someone is needing detox or needing to go into a 30-day program, again, like I said, we're hoping to get a 30-day program started and going in here locally, which would be nice. But you also have your medical doctors. You have your churches, and up here in Pine Top, like I said, there is the church that does a lot of free services that people can jump into. There's AA, NA online that you can get into meetings too. So there are a lot of different resources. It's just looking for them and finding them and ask. You can always give us a call. I need an AA meeting. Let's see what we can do to help you find one.
Do we have any local hotlines, or hotlines mostly a national and state level?
Most of them are national, state. Now you can call any of the ChangePoint outpatient sites. They automatically go to a hotline and you get someone to talk to in person when we're closed. So you have someone to talk to, and they will assess for crisis, and if you need someone locally to come out and talk to you or make contact, or sometimes they can address the issues on the phone. So we do have that.
Those hotlines can be lifelines.
Yes, they can. I know at Summit they have the nurses hotline, so if there's a medical issue, you can call the nurse there to find out, I took this, or I'm not feeling well, whatever, and they can assess and kind of give you direction there too.
Oh, it's amazing. Thank you for sharing that. It's so important. And our last question is there anything else you'd want to add, or that you have message?
I think we need to be prepared for long term. consequences and how are we going to help our community rebound from this economically as well as physically and emotionally. So we, as a community, we're going to have to come together and kind of figure out what are those consequences and how are we going to support each other and help each other out. And you know, when you couldn't go out to restaurants and they were doing the takeout, we decided here every Friday we're going to order from somewhere just to help them out and support the restaurants in our town. And so anything that we can do to help our community members, our neighbors, is one thing. I think school academics is something that we're going to have to look at, because school is not just academics, it is athletics, it's music, it's art. Those are all ways that we learn to share our emotions and our feelings in appropriate ways, how we learn teamwork and problem solving, how we learn to deal with disappointment and frustrations and things like that. So we really have to figure a way to teach our kids that. They're not going back to school right away. How do we do that? What are different ways we can do that? So I think there's a lot of potential growth going forward, but I think we're going to have some consequences we're going to have to figure out how to deal with. And we will. And as Americans, we will. We always have. We step up and we do it, and we'll figure it out.
And we are figuring it out. And we're figuring it out because of people like you. And we so appreciate the work that you do. It's vital, especially right now. It is life-saving.
It is for some people, for sure. It
Yes.
is life-saving.
So thank you for taking time. I feel like we all should pay you for a free therapy session. We can Venmo you the money.
Yeah.
Thank you for taking time to visit with
Yes,
us and to
absolutely.
share your expertise. We appreciate it. Thank you, Shelly.
Thank you.